Yeah, you're welcome to this series of lectures. Now, the last time we were together, we were talking about how to start writing, and we began to talk about the title as very important. Now, we started with launching into writing within the prose narrative. Now, and then if you can remember, we started with the autobiography. Well, autobiographies have their own kinds of peculiarities. Number one, if you are the one writing your story, I think it's very easy. You know your story, you know what you want to write, and then you schematize it. Like I told us when we started, I hazarded telling us that imaginative writing is a component of the imaginative and the scientific. You've got to know that. You've got to understand that imaginative writing, yes, the prompt is imaginative, but the work is scientific, and you've got to get those things right when you are dealing with this. Now, having said that, we are going into the science of writing a worthwhile prose narrative. I would suggest, because many writers have their different ways of approaching things. So what I say here will be just suggestions, okay, in terms of how to go about it, because the imagination can be very, very diverse. But then this is very, very consistent with very serious plans of doing what you want to do. I would suggest that to write, of course, you have your story within your mind. Why not write a scheme of what you want to do? Okay, you want to write the story of your imagines, and then it interfaces with the development of your own society as a child. It has a link to your family background at the economic level, in particular reference to the geography of where you actually live. Let's say you lived in a marine-dominated environment where the water is so much, a riverine area, and you want to talk about your roots. You can always know somebody that is not creative, that has written his autobiography with the way the person just begins to talk about all the story. I was born in 1995. When I was born, my parents did not have much money. So they were struggling, and that denied me going to the primary school. For goodness sake, what kind of watered down, what sort of uninviting banner? I can't go up to a page before I drop search. It's probably going to kill all about my expectations. I'll just drop it, because you see, it's wise to drop some books. When some books are proving to be very, very unproductive, don't let them contaminate you, drop them. Okay, but when you write, you want to start with an amazing intro. And this goes with any form of creative writing at all. Remember, the creativity is not actually the subject matter of what you are writing. The creativity has to do with the language, the tropes, the strategies by which you do your story writing. So you've got to know that your creative writing relies on the language used and the way you go about the plot by which the language is released. Now, let me start something like this. You want to write an autobiography, let's say, and this might not even be autobiographical. This might just be a fictional thing as well, using the first-person narrative technique. You want to start a story, and you want to arouse immediate attention to yourself, starting with your birth. Let me attempt some from here. You want to start a story about your life, and you want to make an immediate arrest. And let me tell you, if you don't succeed to arrest your audience from the beginning, you are going to most likely lose them before the first chapter is over. Okay? However long the chapter could be. But the moment you get them arrested from line 1, I will even suggest from the very first, and that's why it's not very easy writing, not very easy even starting. So start might be more difficult than going on. To start, you've got to meditate, you've got to strategize, you've got to be intentional, and you go about it. Now, let me start something like, let's imagine I am talking about myself. I want to tell my story, and I'm starting my story to my audience this way. You can call it an autobiography, you can call it a first-person narrative novel and all that. But I want to write the story of the persona talking. I can start something like this, something intriguing, something unexpected, something unimaginable. I can say something like this. I was born in a hurry, and I put a full stop there. When I was born, my parents thought that they ought to have been dead hours before. But by some miracle, you may say, or by some things that go beyond mere things that happen within the human space, a doctor came from the blues. My mother was already perspiring out of labor, and she was just about dying. And the enemy had thrown a bomb to the next village to mine. My dad had run away. Everybody was scampering. My mother sunk on the floor, expecting what next to happen. But this doctor came from nowhere and dragged her along and somehow suspended her within the hut where he was hiding for about 30 minutes. The miracle was that my mother didn't die, and I too was kicking furiously, wanting to get out, not knowing what was happening, as if I knew what was happening. But the doctor was bold. He took his chances. He ushered my entry into the world, and here was I, born within a war that I am still battling, full stop. Well, I don't know how successful I've been in just talking about something like imaginative, but I don't think that might sound uninteresting. I think you want to continue. How could somebody be born in a hurry? What were the circumstances that caused that? And, the progression of that plot will be what you are going to keep, you are going to continuously supply as the whole thing goes on and goes on and goes on. Now, as you go on in that kind of thing, if it's going to be something that is going to be short distance, like the prose, like the short story, I would suggest you will need to have a mastery of language to the point where you can economize a number of things you could have said in a very long span of narrative. But if you are dealing with something as fast-read as the novel, this is your opportunity for descriptive and winding narrative, where you can connect what happened some centuries before you were born to what is happening now and what might happen in the future, in gradually introducing characters into the story that are going to form, the conflict horizons within that particular narrative attempt. And then you must be able to schematize dialogue in such a way that will form a particular, trend, what comes next within the narrative. You have to also be very adept to nuances of creating suspense, surprise, a shock, and then fluidity in the narrative, in the descriptiveness of what you are saying. If you are doing something that has to do with the short story is I often call it a short distance runner. It doesn't have so much of the expectations of a novel, maybe developing full characterizations of multiple characters. You can't do that in a short story. You can't, except where your area of what you are describing has to do with particular issues that relate directly to the short story. You don't normally have the opportunity to keep describing what you have to say. The short story is often something that flows easily, creates areas of suspense, surprise, and shock. And there is much economy in the use of language. If you have read Guy de Maupassant's, The Necklace, you know what I'm talking about here. Please just go and read it. Guy de Maupassant, The Necklace. You will find a master dealing with how to write a short story. A story has a very simple plot, organic, okay? The language is accessible. The characterization is not much. And we don't really have fully developed characterization there. We just have the story going on with the aim of the plot to eventually arrive at a surprise. And if you read that story, you will find out the story starts with a particular event, a particular socio-economic reality, to a very unexpected invitation to an arena which the protagonist would not have naturally found a class within, a kind of honor. Then, the anxiety to belong to that arena makes her to borrow a necklace from a very compassionate friend of ours who is very rich, and that necklace is worth so much money. She loses the necklace, and that is where the plot goes on into the wonders of suspense and surprise. I don't want to tell you the whole story so that I don't mess it up here, so that you don't get a situation where you can't read it. So read Guy de Maupassant's The Necklace as a kind of example, and you discover how to write a very interesting short story. Now, if you're going to write a novel, or you have the opportunity to expand on characterization, to talk about this, to introduce this particular scenario, to write the history of a particular place, to link it with legendary, to bring surprising incidents. You can be cinematic, can go on for a very, very long stretch of the imagination. You can even subvert, particular knowings of a particular genre. Nowadays, because of postmodernism, you find some writers dealing with multiple modes of writing within a piece of writing. At once, somebody might introduce a kind of WhatsApp chat within a novel. You might also see somebody bringing in something like a blog within a novel. Another chapter might introduce a diary where, the person is talking about his diary. While the person is talking about his diary, he's talking about events that happen within particular times. And then the story goes on. In fact, it can allow philosophizing. But all that matters is this. It's not about a particular way of doing things, but it's about knowing how to plot, how to plan, how to be scientific with what you are going to do with your imagination and the end of what you want to deliver to your imagined or known audience. Ladies and gentlemen, these classes continue when next to me. Please remember to like this, to subscribe, and to share. Thank you very much.